welcome to what may or may not be the ugliest video I've ever made. I read Queen of Air and Darkness, and I will be making the mistake I've made for years at this point, which is where I try to take a really shitty series and try to analyze it critically and just give it way more credit than the author actually deserves. And I have to say that I thought that this series was better than the other Shadowhunter books, but that is really not saying a lot. And in addition to that, the problems I have with this series are very similar to the ones I have with the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices. There are pretty cool concepts, but they're not executed to their fullest potential and ultimately just leave a really bad taste in my mouth. Especially the way the parabatai bond is treated once again. In the Infernal Devices, the parabatai bond between Jem and Will is basically irrelevant. I have a whole video, you can watch it here, or you can watch it here. I still don't know which side it goes on. In the Dark Artifices, the parabatai bond isn't irrelevant, but there is a complete subversion of it, which I would say is probably even more messed up than it was in the first series. But I need to preface this by saying that Cassandra Clare is not someone I feel comfortable supporting. Caleb has a really good video about this, which I will leave down below, but the take-home message from that, for me at least, was that the Mortal Instruments started as Ginny and Ron fanfiction. So reading this book through that lens made it even less enjoyable. But incest aside, I wasn't a fan of the romance in this series even before I knew that when I first read Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows when they came out. And just to provide some context here, the origin of this channel is that I would read bad books and then write really long emails to my friend Fur. Shout out to Fur, I love you very much. But now, instead of making those emails, I just make terrible videos instead. And you have Fur to thank for that. So I have an email of me recording my first reaction to Lord of Shadows back in June 2017, where I say, every time we read from Julian's point of view, I'm just like, I get it. You love Emma. I get that you can't have her. I get that it sucks. If it weren't for the Emma thing, he'd be such an interesting character. Like, the thing with his uncle and parents and how he essentially raised his siblings is so messed up. Just less pining for Emma, please. That would be nice. The whole family aspect of this series is super cool, and I just wish we could think about making out with the person he was raised with like a sibling less. Yeah, that'd be nice. You'd think that that's not too much to ask for, but with Cassandra Clare it is. I remember little to nothing about Lady Midnight, and that email is unfortunately lost forever. But there are two scenes that really stuck out to me, which is the one where we find out that Julian has a secret room where he just goes to paint Emma, and then the scene where they have Shame on the beach for the first time. As an aside here, I just hate that we know all of Cassandra Clare's kinks, because I swear to God, in every series there is some kind of sex scene that is linked to a near-death experience. Those are the two elements that really stuck with me because it shows that obsessive love that transcends everything. Much like Tessa's and Jem's.
As in, Julian hadn't ever even kissed anyone other than Emma because he was always just so set on her, and how it's just really, just a bit weird, isn't it? Them going from having their first kiss to like shame, and Julian's never even been with anyone else. Like, it just, he just has no chill, and I really don't like that. Like, not to shame anyone, you know, Julian's body, Julian's choice. It just all felt so heightened and unrealistic and just really just icky. Not even mentioning the fact that him just having a room full of pictures that are just Emma and no one else is allowed to go in is extremely obsessive and serial killer behavior.
Even the creepy things that Julian does are completely justified because it's for the sake of romantic love. And I see where Cassandra Clare is coming from, because in traditional romance novels, which I also have a video about, again, somewhere here, love is obsessive, but that's sort of the point of the book. That's what you're getting when you're reading a true romance novel. But this is not a true romance novel, this is a young adult fantasy series, and surely you should be able to place emphasis on non-romantic relationships and romantic ones equally. But I would argue that there are no completely platonic or even familial connections that are given the same importance as romantic ones. Everyone is just neatly paired off, and at times there are suggestions that platonic love is valid, such as through things like the parabatai bond, getting a friend married, but that is then immediately undermined by the entirety of the Infernal Devices, and now again in this series. Because this revolves around Emma and Julian going beyond the parabatai bond. Their romantic love allows them to be even better than just friends. So Here's another prediction from my 2017 email where I'm discussing that some people have suggested that they're gonna figure out how to break the parabatype bond, and I said I really don't think that's gonna happen. So somehow Julian and Emma are gonna use their parabatype power mixed with romance to save the world or whatever. Like, it's not gonna drive them insane. They're gonna be the exception and the special ones and hone the power, because romance is superior to any platonic relationship ever. And that is exactly how this series ends. Their bond makes them be able to turn into angels. For reasons. And we are left with the same message once again. Friendship is good, but romance is better in every situation. And on the one hand, parabatype falling in love is supposedly monstrous, and that's where the siblings kink comes in. But then on the other hand, it is also what saves their lives at the end of the book. And the way we're supposed to feel about the parabatype bond is so arbitrary. Like, is it good or is it bad, and why is it good or bad? I understand that to a certain extent it is just one of those arbitrary cultural things, and I am willing to kind of leave some leeway for that. But when you have your entire series revolving around why the bond is so bad or good, maybe provide a little bit more explanation. And she does try to do that. She writes, "There is a reason parabatype cannot fall in love, and it is monstrous beyond all you could imagine. The parabatype rune was not given to you by the angel, but by men, and men are flawed." And then Emma immediately counters that because she thinks that Clary's been running around making up her own runes and they're fine. And then the Queen just says, "I see you do not understand, but you will." And I just don't think we ever do. Do they provide more explanations? If I've just missed it, please let me know. But it just really doesn't make any sense to me, the man-made thing. I mean, are microwaves evil? Modern medicine? Marriage? Birthday parties? Does there lie corruption at the heart of all of these things just because an angel didn't create them? So as far as I'm concerned, the parabatype bond is an arbitrary thing that does not exist to actually show platonic love. It exists just to add more attention to romantic relationships, such as Alec being kind of into Jace and that adding drama, and then Will and Jem being best friends and liking the same girl. And also obviously just to satisfy that incest kink, but in a very popular mainstream young adult novel. So why do I care so much that romance is just placed above everything in this god-awful fictional universe? Why am I still making a video about it 2 years after my first video about this exact issue? And the honest answer is that I'm not really sure, because whether a non-fiction book has the duty to educate you, that's a completely philosophical question, and honestly one that I don't really have an answer to. So all I'm going to say is that the romance model that is repeated again and again in this fictional universe just leaves a really bad taste in my mouth, and I think it's something worth pointing out because this is not something we should really be normalizing. Okay, I've had my rant, so now I'm just gonna talk about the series overall. And like I said, I do think it's objectively slightly better. I think the writing has improved, but I've just noticed that Cassandra Clare isn't necessarily good at concluding each miniseries that she has. The sixth book in the Mortal Instruments still stands out to me as being absolutely nonsensical fuckery from start to finish. Does anyone else remember when Clary was just randomly leaving with Sebastian, and what an absolute fever dream that was. In this conclusion, we seem to regress back to the Mortal Instruments because we have just spent 6 books worrying about Valentine and Sebastian and the Mortal Cup and all of those things. And then we seem to move on to something more interesting with the whole Malcolm thing. And now we've just gone back to the Mortal Cup, and I didn't even care the first time around, so I just felt absolutely nothing this time. There was just a sense of the plot really getting lost, because I think in the first book we had a very clear goal with the Malcolm thing, and then if I remember correctly, even in Lord of Shadows, we felt like we were at least going somewhere, and then in this book, we're just kind of... I don't even know what we're doing. The whole detour into another dimension just was not for me. I've discussed before how things in books that are anything like dreams where they're not real, I just do not care, which is very silly because obviously nothing in a fantasy book is real, but if it's not real within the fantasy book, then I don't care. Flawed logic, but there it is. Halfway through this book, I was just so sick of it. It just all felt so stupid and so unnecessary. I was just like, kill Julian, kill Emma. Honestly, kill Clary and Jace too, see if I give a fuck, because I promise I won't. The only redeemable thing was that another one of my predictions came true, which is at the end, Jem and Tessa are gonna show up with their weird-ass relationship and everyone's gonna act like it's fine, but it's not, and they're gonna bring a whole lot of exposition, which I think that did happen. And some of you may or may not know how I feel about Tessa, and the way I feel is just that she is the worst character in this entire fictional universe. She is so annoying. Actually, Clary might be worse. it's been a while. Clary is really bad as well, and if you just need a reminder as to why Clary is bad, let me just bring your attention to the fact that she wears a shirt that says unicorn power in this book. Enough said with that, I think. And I think, to be fair, I do have to say that maybe this apathy and general annoyance is more a product of 3 years having passed since I've read Lord of Shadows. I think even if I had just finished Lord of Shadows, there is something that feels so fanfiction-y and so fan service-y about this one that I just don't think I picked up as much in the first two. Just all of this random traveling and seeing what their lives could have been, and there being a kissing scene in seemingly every other chapter, it just didn't sit well with me. Maybe it's also just because I read differently now. Like, I used to read books that I didn't like that much very dutifully. I absolutely hated City of Heavenly Fire and the fifth one. That one really stood out to me as being even worse, I think. But I read every single word. But now I'm older, more mature, still wasting my time on this, but I am more confident in my ability to just pick things up along the way. I don't need to read about Zara Dearborn being a cartoon villain 15 times in a row just to realize that she's evil. Which is just a bit upsetting, because I remember Malcolm actually being somewhat interesting, because I feel like we actually understood where he was coming from. He wasn't just bad, whereas Zara is this caricature of a Trump supporter, and it's just dull, and I don't think it's very helpful politically anyway to present such a rigid, arbitrarily evil image of another character or another group. But now we're back to the duty of books to educate or not, so let's just leave that there. So yeah, this is all just a bit upsetting, because judging by my Lord of Shadows email, I did enjoy some aspects of the beginning of the series. I especially talked about Mark. I found him to be really interesting and also quite entertaining, and I liked Karen as well, but then this book had to go and ruin it just a little bit. They were just a bit lackluster. Again, there was just too many random kissing scenes between them or other characters. And maybe the thing with Christina is really good polyamorous representation. I'm really not the person to speak on that, but I do have to say that it is another element where romance conquers all, and all of the going behind each other's backs and Christina feeling guilty, and obviously the tension that would arise from a situation like that naturally, is all just forgotten about, because again, it's for the sake of love, so it's completely fine to go behind your friend's back. And we're left with another big fuck you to friendship. So that is all I have to say about this book, and like I said, I feel quite silly. I'm too old to be reading this, and I really am, but will I maybe read the other one that came out recently? Just to get my blood pressure up again? Just to feel anything? Potentially.